someone's going to take that cocaine and sell it to some particular person on the street.
Going to, but to have it is not a crime. Shouldn't be a crime in a civilized country.
Certainly, I mean, again, whether it's an ounce of cocaine his intent is to sell it.
Well, how about having a pack of cigarettes?
Having a pack of cigarettes?
That's going to kill people too. In fact, it kills a lot more people than hard drugs do.
10 lines of cocaine and getting behind a car,
No, sorry. If you want to compare it with behind a car, how about a can of beer? Yeah. A can of beer is far more lethal behind a car than cocaine. So, in fact, the matter is that having a substance should not be considered a crime because so far it's victimless. If you want to talk about distributing substances that are lethal, yeah, that ought to be brought up, but then let's be serious. Tobacco is far ahead of anything else. Alcohol is second. Hard drugs are way down the bottom. And furthermore, most drug use, though it's very harmful for the person, has very little social effect. The crime associated with hard drugs is mostly a consequence of criminalization.
So should we go after the people selling cigarettes, making cigarettes?
If the principle is let's not get lethal substances out to the public, the first one you'd go after is tobacco. The next one you'd go after is alcohol. Way down the list you'd get to cocaine, and sort of invisibly low you'd get to marijuana. In fact, there have been.
Finish. Please, I mean, a lot more violence comes from someone smoking some coke.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Someone smoking a cigarette?
No, that's not true. It comes from purchasing coke and selling coke, but that's because it's illegal. That's because of the criminalization of it. That's because of the criminalization, not the effect. There are good studies of this. The consequences of tobacco doesn't happen to cause, violence, but alcohol definitely does. The deaths that are alcohol related are way beyond the deaths that are hard drug related. If you separate in the hard drug case the deaths that are the result of criminalization. So yeah, when you have drug gangs and narco traffickers fighting for turf and so on, sure, then there's going to be plenty of killings, just like when you had Al Capone running Chicago. But that's a consequence of the criminalization, not the drugs. What drugs tend to do is make people passive. Alcohol, on the other hand, makes them violent.
The opposite of me.
It might be unusual, but they're very. I mean, there's extensive studies of this. There are extensive studies in the criminology literature, and you can take a look at the results. The basic result is that tobacco-related deaths are way beyond anything else, just an order of magnitude greater. Furthermore, those are not just to the user; they're to everybody else. So deaths from passive smoking alone are much higher than drug-related deaths from passive smoking. Furthermore, they're transferred on to the next generation. Alcohol is the next biggest killer. And it's a killer not only to the people who use it, which is bad enough, but also to others because of its relation to violence. Then comes next is things like hard drugs. And they are rarely harmful to others. They're harmful to the user. When you get down to marijuana, last time I looked, there had been about 60 million users and not one known case of overdose. I mean, it's not good for you, undoubtedly, but it's probably at the level of coffee. And in fact, notice that there has never been a medical reason for criminalizing marijuana. I've looked through the history of this. If you're interested, I don't know if you want me to run through it, but it's an interesting history. Marijuana was criminalized. See, very commonly, substances are criminalized because they're associated with what are called the dangerous classes. Poor people or working people. So, for example, in England in the 19th century, there was a period when gin was criminalized and whiskey wasn't, because gin is what poor people drank. That's kind of like the sentencing for crack and powder. When in the early stages of Prohibition in the United States, one of the targets was immigrant workers. These guys hanging around the saloons in New York. Got to go after them. The rich guys in upstate New York, they're going to drink no matter what. They want to come home after work, they'll drink. But go after those guys. What about marijuana? And marijuana was brought in by Mexicans. And the first criminalization of marijuana was in the Southwest, in the States. It was in New Mexico, later Utah, and so on, and it was specifically targeted against Mexicans. It didn't get criminalized in the United States until shortly after Prohibition ended. After Prohibition ended, we had this huge Bureau of Narcotics, and they had to do something. So they discovered, that marijuana is going to do all kind of horrible things to you. The Senate testimony about this is mind-boggling. They did have a representative of the American Medical Association who said, we don't have any medical evidence about this. He was shut up, denounced, they got rid of him right away. Then they found somebody else. This is literally true. They found a pharmacologist, a guy teaching at Temple University, who was doing experiments with marijuana in dogs. Okay. And they brought this guy, and the testimony is hilarious. You really have to read it. They brought this guy, and he testified that when he gave marijuana to dogs, they went insane. They did all kind of things. And then some senator or somebody asked him, this is from memory, so it's probably a little off, but something like this. It was in the 30s. They asked the guy, well, have you ever tried marijuana on humans? So he said, yeah, I tried it on himself. And he said, well, what happened? He said, I turned into a vulture. I started flying around the room. So oh my God, this stuff is terrible. It makes people insane. And marijuana, it was declared by Congress that marijuana makes people insane. But then something happened. It turned out that lawyers, defense lawyers, got the idea, okay, I can use this for an insanity defense. So if a guy was found, who killed 3 cops, his lawyer would say, well, he had marijuana before, so he was insane, so he can't do anything. And people were getting off on charges, like cop killing, for example, on the claim that they had marijuana. So all of a sudden it was discovered that marijuana doesn't make you insane. Congress decided, sorry, it doesn't make you insane because we want to wipe that out. The next idea was marijuana is an entry drug. It's the drug you take and then you go on to something else. Well, there was never any evidence for that. But that was decided. And then in the early 50s, something else happened. Marijuana is being brought in here by red Chinese to poison the American population and destroy us, So therefore, we got to stop marijuana. And it kind of goes on like this. Actually, the peak of marijuana use was, as I said, in the 70s. But that was rich kids, so you don't throw them in jail. And then it got seriously criminalized. You really throw people in jail for it when it was poor people. I mean, that's roughly the history. The detailed history is quite interesting.